Hey guys, Phinn Lynch here. I'm on the PPG Pokemon TCG A team, and I'm just back from Costa Mesa Regionals where I took second place playing Zoroark Eggs. So I'm just going to profile the deck and tell you guys how it went for me and talk about it. Alright, so here's an overview of the list. I'm going to just focus on one part at a time, but here's the whole thing. So first off, we have the Zoroark line. I got 3 Lunge Zoroark, 1 Paralyzing Gaze, and then 4 of the GX and 1 of the Foul Play. Decided to play the Foul Play instead of the stand-in Zoroark just because I felt like Buzzwole was kind of tough if you didn't have it. I didn't think it was really a negative matchup, but that it was too close to 50-50, and that if I ran a little bit cold, I could lose to it, and I was kind of afraid of that. So I felt like when you have Foul Play, the matchup goes up by like 15 percentage points, and I felt like that was too much to give up to play the stand-in one. I do like the stand-in one, and it has some nice benefits, especially if you play Toad, and it's way better in the mirror match, I'll definitely say that, but I just really didn't want to have a hard time against Buzzwole because I thought that was going to be pretty popular, and I felt like this was, you know, it would suffice in mirror, and I have a lot of other stuff for mirror in here anyway. Got to play 4 Zoroark GX in every variant of this deck pretty much. That's just going to be your main draw engine, your main attacker. The whole deck's centered around it, so you can't do any less than 4. I only played 1 Paralyzing Gaze Zoroark, just because that's the only count I could get access to, actually. It's kind of funny. But, yeah, I think Connor Peterson was, I was hoping he would have more, but I think he just only brought the 1, so I could only play 1. But ideally, you would play 3 of this one and 1 of this one. I think that's a better split, or even just 4 of the Paralyzing Gaze ones. But yeah, I definitely use Paralyzing Gaze a lot, actually. I used it like 4 or 5 different times throughout the event, so I'm really happy I had the 1. I just wish I had more, but I made sure to just take full advantage of that one by evolving these ones, and then just keeping that one around so that I could Paralyzing Gaze if I needed to. Played 4 eggs. Wish I could fit 5, honestly. I know that sounds insane, but when I was playing against Igor, I prized one of my eggs, and it stopped me from getting the knockout one time, so I was kind of irritated about that. But anyway, yeah, that's the ideal count in this kind of deck. I mean, it's called Zoroark eggs for a reason. You can just get turn 2 one-shots super easily, fill up your whole bench with it, and then you're usually doing that in combination with a Hex. So you propagate 4 to your hand, and then Hex to get rid of the Sudowoodo effect. This one, your opponent usually is doing that to you. So yeah, and then you just bench them all, and then right after the Hex goes out of play, you just pop them back off all to your discard, and then you can do the same thing again. And since it only limits you to 4 and it gives you 8 bench spots, it's perfect because you get 4 eggs that fills up the 4 bench spots. So it's very ideal. It's a super good combination when Sudowoodo is popular. Yeah, so I think 4 is just the best count. Super consistent. You get to trade away eggs even when you can't compressor them away because you'll just draw into them. You can just get them back as many times as you need to. Very strong in mirror match. I think it's great, especially when you play one of the Exeggutor. This idea is Isaiah Williams's. I think me and Daniel Attavilla actually thought of this a little bit before he did, but the thing was me and Danny were just kind of like, yeah, whatever, we just kind of brushed it off, but Isaiah actually tested it, and then he realized it's very good, so he convinced us to put it in. Yeah, it was useful. I think it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, but it was really good still. I guess I just thought it was going to be, like, incredible, but I didn't face any Wailord, and that's like the #1 reason it's in there is because Wailord becomes an auto win once that happens. You just throw a choice band on it, and you blockade for pretty much the whole game. They're going to try and get rid of your DCs, but you can just puzzle them back. You play 4 anyway, so yeah, you just blockade until you win. You hit them for weakness too, so yeah, really easy matchup. It's also nice in mirror match because your opponent will probably be hex chaining you if they can, so they'll just try and hex you every turn if they can, and you can break that just by using blockade. You're going to have to give up a 1 prize attacker in that process, but that's fine. You know, 1 prize is not a big deal usually, and if you can break the hex lock and then establish your own hex lock after that, it's huge. So I actually didn't end up using that a whole lot in mirror, but I think I probably should have tried to go for it more. It just can be a little bit hard sometimes. I used this when I played against Jose Marrero because he was playing Gyarados. It was pretty cool. I intentionally did 140 with Riotous Beating to a Gyarados, and then since it's got 150 HP on the next turn, I was like red card, and then blockaded for the knockout. because it does 10, and that was an insane combination because he just couldn't do anything for a turn, and then I had a really good next turn after that. So it comes up in really cool niche spots. Also against Ryan Allred, I used that thing. I Sky Returned for 30 damage against his Gardevoir, and then at that point Gardevoir had 200 HP left, so I blockaded for 10, putting it at 190, which sets up perfect math with a Zoroark full bench and a choice band, because since it has resistance, you know, you're reduced by 20, so you do 190 with Rite of Speeding. So it set up perfect math for me, and it just stopped him from doing anything for a turn like that. And I only had to give up the one prize, so it wasn't that bad. Yeah, I definitely used it, and I found it to be pretty useful. 3 Shaman instead of 3 Lele, because this deck doesn't really like going for the turn 1 Bridget, actually. It's more centered around going for turn 1 Hex or Getsus. So it's just more speed, right? You just want to keep setting up so you can draw into your Zoras, you know, your Compressor, your Eggs, Sudowoodo, and stuff like that. You just want to draw more than you want to play Supporter on your first turn, really. So yeah, I felt like that was warranted. I actually kind of wanted a 4th Shaman. I found Shaman to be extremely useful. Definitely would not play 2 now that I've tried out 3. 2 Lele, just because it's consistent. You want to have ways to search out your one of supporters. You want to have turn 1 Bridget or Hex or Getsus whenever you need it, really. So I think 2 is good. 3 would be nice, but I don't think it's really necessary. And 1 is definitely not a good idea, because if you prize it, you're in trouble a lot. And I use multiple Lele in a game all the time. Sudowoodo is mostly for mirror. I mean, this deck has a huge bench all the time anyway. You got plenty of bench spots to work with, so you might as well play something like Sudowoodo that just sits on the bench and limits, you know, your opponent's ability to put stuff down. Necessary for mirror. I played against Joey Rudiger and Caleb Gedimer, and they were playing Zoroark Lycanroc, and they were not playing Sudowoodo, and it gave me a huge edge in the mirror. They were just playing Muck instead, but they couldn't always get Muck into play, and they didn't always want to get Muck into play because it, you know, creates problems for them too. So, you know, me having that and them not, I think gave me a huge advantage, and I beat Caleb, I think, in a big part, you know, because of that, and then I beat Joey the first game, and then I was like, you know, we can just tie, I don't care, because I already had 30 match points, so I was guaranteed top 8, so, you know, we just tied anyway, and then he made top 8 too, so that was really cool. But yeah, the matchup I think is quite favorable for this deck, just because of the way it's built. This build's a lot more consistent, I would say. 3 Colress, so I cut my N for Colress, because N is just not that good in this deck. You have Red Card to kind of do the same effect N does, but I'd say you can N and Hex, or N and Getsus, which ends up being better than N a lot of the time. Even if you're going to end them to 1, it's just around as good usually, and Chorus is much more consistent. So Chorus will draw you like 6 to 14 cards usually. Like I'd say on average I get around 8 or 9. So yeah, Chorus gets much more cards than N does, and it has use throughout a whole game, and you can kind of make up for not having N with those other combinations anyway. N just wasn't very good for me. I think it's only really helpful in Garbodor, in the Garbodor matchup. But I guess I lost to Garbodor in finals, so maybe I should rethink that. But I think 3 Colress was great. 2 Hex, because, you know, you need Hex to stop opposing Sudowoodos. So if you prize the 1, you're in huge trouble. So 2, just make sure you never prize it. And then 2 is also nice because you can compress your 1 away on your first turn, and then have the other 1 still left in your deck so that you can Wonder Tag for it. So it gives you multiple ways to search that out. I think 2 Hex is really, really good. You could even go up to 3, but I probably wouldn't like to play 3 just because it would kind of clunk up your setups. So maybe not on that one. But yeah, 2 is definitely perfect. 1 Guzma is great because you don't really want to use Guzma very much at all. You usually want to use Hex if you can. Hex or Colress. Those are pretty much your 2 main supporters. Almost every turn you're doing one of those. So yeah, Guzma doesn't really come up too much. I prized my 1 Guzma like a decent amount, and it was just fine. I just took it off the prizes at some point or something like that. And you know, you really don't need more than 1. 1 Bridget is all you need in this deck because I have Level Ball and Pokemon Communication to make up for not playing the second one. I said pretty frequently that if I use Bridget on my first turn, I'm not really having a good game because this deck is centered around getting turn 1 Hex or Getsus, especially when you're going first, but even when you're going second too. So yeah, 1 Bridget's fine. I prized it in the finals, and that was kind of a pain, but I think it was fine because I'm pretty sure I just ended up chorusing anyway, and I drew enough cards to, you know, get my setup. So I think a lot of the time I just chorus when I go second instead of playing Bridget turn 1, and it's pretty much just as good usually. 1 Getsus was huge. I used Getsus so many times. That was pretty much MVP. I think Getsus was insane. Getsus is the reason I won my top 4 match against Toadgarb. I was able to red card and Getsus him, and he just lost all of his outs to draw, and it won me the game. And then another game, I used red card just to get him into a dead hand. Garbotoxin tends to make it easy for that deck to dead draw, so that was the way I was able to beat that. Togarb is supposed to be an auto loss for this deck, by the way, so it's kind of amazing that I was able to pull that one out. I even 2-0'd him. But anyway, Getsus is like the whole reason I was able to do that. It also won me a game against Azul, I believe, in top 8. So Getsus really got me through my top cut matches. It didn't work out for me as much in the finals, because when I played it against Igor, I red card Getsus him one time, and then I got rid of all of his outs, but he just top decked teammates, and I took a knockout, so that didn't really work out. But I'd say a really big portion of the time it does work, especially against Garbodor decks, because they can't Wonder Tag once Garbodor's in play. So yeah, that's definitely MVP. 3 Skyfield is perfect. I know people were cutting down to 2 because they felt like Mirror is already going to have Skyfield, so you don't need to play as many because, you know, they're going to do it for you, but that's pretty flawed logic, I'd say. They're not always going to put down the Skyfield for you. They're going to blow off your Skyfield sometimes. You're going to need the consistency just to get it down when you need it. I think 3 is definitely needed. One of the biggest problems that I would run into in Mirror in testing, and kind of in the tournament too, was just not drawing the Skyfield at the right time to get the knockout. So I would say at least 3. You could even consider 4, but 4 is probably overkill and expanded, just because like you can't really play more than the counts that you need in the deck, really. 1 comp search. I tried dowsing. Dowsing just was inconsistent. It made me dead draw a couple times in my openings. And I just found that in general, you know, being able to dowsing for a puzzle wasn't as strong as the consistency that being able to computer search for anything in the deck is. So I just felt like comp was more consistent, better overall, and that definitely was my experience at the event as well. Level Ball is really cool because it can search out for Zora on your first turn or in the early game, so you can make sure you get set up while still playing a supporter like Hex or Getsus. It also can search out Execute if you need to get one of those just to trade. I definitely did Level Ball for Execute several times. It's, you know, it's just a burnable card too. Like you can just play that and then set up for another card. It makes the whole 3 Shaman engine work really well, just playing more cards like Pokemon Communication and Level Ball. So I definitely really liked it. Pokemon Communication, same idea there, but it really, I think, I don't know which one was better, but they were both really strong. Pokemon Communication searched, like in the early game a lot. I would use it to put back a Zoroark GX, or like maybe foul play Zoroark or an Exeggutor or something like that, and then search out a Shaman or a Lele so that I could get set up. That, or I would already have a Shaman or a Lele in my hand, and I could search out my Zora so that I could safely play Getsus or Hex on my first turn without like having a bad setup. So sort of the same idea with both of those, but they're just slightly different because this one can help you set up Zoroarks after you already have Zoras in play, and it can also get you the Shaman or Lele, while this one just searches out Zora and Execute. 1 Rescue Stretcher is great. I actually wanted 2 though. I think that was one thing that I would consider changing. It's really nice to have multiple, especially against Garbodor, because they shut off your propagation so that you can't, you know, get the eggs back and keep filling up your bench. So it's a little bit harder. Well, not a little bit. It's definitely much harder to, you know, consistently get those one-shots like you do in all your other matchups because they're locking you like that. And the thing is, even when you blow her off the Garbotoxin, since the new lists are playing Roadblock, like Igor's, you know, you can't really do that either because, you know, you blow it off, then you can propagate, but you can't put them down because, you know, you're locked on your bench size because of Sudowoodo. So you end up having to blow her off there, Tool and Garbodor, and then get the eggs back, and then play your own Hex after you trade and stuff, and then get the knockout, which is just a stupid, hard combination to get, and that's why another stretcher would have been nice, because it makes it so that you can get enough Pokemon down on your bench without having to do those weird shenanigans. And then 1 Blower was fine. I think 2 would have been helpful in my finals match, but I don't think it's necessarily the best tech for Garbodor just because they have the Sudowoodo, so like I was just explaining, you have to pull off that kind of crazy combination if you want to get the one-shot. So when you do Blower, it doesn't have a super big upside anymore because of that. But yeah, definitely need at least 1. 1 is 100% necessary, but I don't think you really need 2 either. I think there's better techs for the Garbodor matchup, but I could be wrong about that. 2 choice bands, great. I think 3 is excessive, but it's nice. You know, I've tested the 3, and I played against Keon in day 2, and he had 3, which ended up helping him out when I played against him. He was my only loss, actually, between the 2 days, except for, obviously, Igor in the finals. But yeah, between top 32 rounds in day 1 and day 1, Keon was my only loss, and his list was a little bit different, but we played Mirror. But anyway, Yeah, two's great. You don't need three, but three's not a bad idea. It's just not really necessary, and other stuff is more important in my opinion. Two battle compressors perfect. Do not cut down to less than that. I love compressor because it just makes your deck more consistent, gets your eggs discarded so that you can get the turn 2 knockout much more frequently. Discards those one of supporters so that you can Verse Seeker for them later. Discards Bridget because that ends up being useless a lot. Same thing with Getsis or Hex. Like if you're against Garbodor, it's really good to get rid of both your Hexes because obviously they're ability locking you, so you don't really need to have those in your deck. But yeah, it just keeps the deck really consistent. 3 is probably too many, but 2 I think is perfect. So I went back and forth a lot on my Floatstone count. I couldn't decide between a second Floatstone and a Special Charge, and even now I'm still not very sure, but pretty much both of them do the same thing. You have Special Charge, which can recycle DCEs so that you can attach to something and retreat for a DCE, so effectively, getting the effect that Floatstone would give you. Just, getting rid of the energy and then shuffling it back in, as opposed to not putting the energy on at all and then retreating. So sort of the same idea there. The reason that Floatstone is a little bit better sometimes is just because in the early game you can't attach twice in one turn, obviously, so if you miss a DC on your first turn, you can still get the turn 2 knockout if you hit Floatstone and DC, assuming you don't have a Zoroark active or something like that. The downside is that, against stuff that discards special energy, against like Mildex, or against stuff with Drampa, like Igor's deck, it's a little bit, it's harder because you have to puzzle with time to get back DCs kind of frequently. Like you have to get back 2 DCs in a game with special chart or with puzzle time sometimes, and that's really painful. And I really wanted special charge for that reason, but at the same time, I did like the consistency with early game aggression that 2 Floatstone provides because you don't have to comp search to get your 1 Floatstone if you play 2 as much of the time. And stuff like that. So I'm back and forth, but I kind of think overall I wish I had the Special Charge, but maybe that's just because I ended up playing against Igor in finals and he was playing Drampa, so who knows. 2 red card is excellent. I wanted a third, honestly. It won me so many games. I mean, if there's... Getsis is probably MVP, but I think red card is also MVP because those two combine super well against Garbodor decks. Yeah, because Garbodor is already locking abilities, so they can't Wonder Tag. So if you just go red card Getsis, you can shuffle back out their Verse Seekers, so they have to have a hard supporter in their hand, like a real supporter. And, as you guys probably know by now, a lot of decks aren't playing too many, actual supporters. Like, I only have, 5, 6, 7, I only have 8 here, right? So not a whole lot in decks at the moment. Yeah, so that really cashes in on that problem. Also against Zoroark Mirror, if you can turn 1 red card and Hex, you just leave them with a completely dead hand usually. They have to have like 1 of their 2 Bridget. Most decks play 2. I mean, I only play 1 as you know, but yeah, they pretty much have to have that in hand or else they're going to get benched out a lot of the time. They usually have another basic, but if you can just Hex again on your second turn, you pretty much bench them out like a very large portion of the time, like a concerning amount of the time. The format's kind of bad at the moment, honestly. That combination is so incredible. But yeah, you'll just win games on top of games if you just go first in red card Hex or red card Getsis, depending on the matchup. I think red card Hex is better usually, but sometimes you'll have a hand where you're like, I need to draw cards, so you got a red card Getsis sometimes just so that you can get a couple extra cards and hopefully get set up. Oh, this is excellent against Gyarados, by the way. Those Maxi Archie decks, I played against, I think, 2 of them in day 2, and against Jose Marrero, I just, red card Getsis him in our second game, and I just, won the game in 2 turns because of that, because I went first, and then the third game, same thing. I just red card Getsis him, he ended up with a dead hand, and then I just, won pretty much because of that. So, super insane combination. Definitely would not play less than 2 red card. Probably would want to fit 3 if I could, but yeah. 4 Ultra Ball, obvious, you can't play less than 4 Ultra Ball, I think, in pretty much any deck right now, so I'm not really going to explain that. 4 puzzles is pretty straightforward, just get back your resources. That count is, unchangeable. You're not going to play 3 puzzles, that's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, that just helps you get back anything in the deck, obviously, any of those important resources, like DC, when you're playing against decks that get rid of your DC. Super good, would not want to cut puzzles. Zoroark makes puzzles way better. I think most games I was able to play double puzzle twice, and that's pretty darn good. The card is ridiculously strong. 4 Verse Seeker it's not played, I don't think, in the Lycanroc Zoroark version very much of the time, but in this deck I really like it because it makes it possible to just stream Hex over and over and over. I mean, I would Hex like 6 turns in a row sometimes, like just insane numbers of turns in a row where my opponent just couldn't do anything because I could just stream Hex over and over. It just makes your starts more consistent, your mid game more consistent, your late game more consistent. I mean, super, super important to have 4 of those, I think. In other variants, I could see playing less, but in this variant, you definitely want 4. And then to round it out, got 4 DC, that's pretty obvious. Don't want to play any less than that because really you only have 4 energy in the whole deck, so that's pretty few. I had a hard time hitting my DC sometimes. I considered playing an energy lotto for that reason, but definitely wouldn't want to play any basic energy just because it's unnecessary and you need 2 attachments to make it work on Zoroark anyway. But yeah, that's about it for the list. So that's it for the deck. I love the deck. I think it's not really good for the format at all. I think it's ridiculous that you can just red card and Hex or red card and gets this on the first turn or even mid-game and just win because of it a lot of the time. But as long as that's around, I'm probably going to keep taking advantage of it and playing Zoroark. Yeah, I definitely think it's the best deck in the format, and I think if I would have played a little bit better in finals against Igor, if variance was a little bit in my favor too, I think I got kind of unlucky against him, but everybody says that, so who knows. I would have been able to pull it out. But yeah, definitely best deck in the format in my opinion, and I think the only card that I would consider changing at the moment is just cutting that second float stone for a special charge. I'm not even sure about that though. So yeah, that's about it.